Saturday night edition of the Anaheim Calling Podcast. We may just have to rename it to the Derek Grant Calling Podcast. Doesn't roll off the tongue quite as much, but after Derek Grant's first career NHL hat trick tonight against the St. Louis Blues, we may just have to do that, CJ, who is joining me here in relief of Jake Rudolph. All good. We've got a deep bench here on the podcast, so no worse for wear. The Ducks winning this one 4-1 in the first game of their road trip. CJ, I mean, is Derek Grant, are we going to have to start talking Selke Trophy after this game?
I really think so, man. I mean, he is the guy that Bob Murray thought Ryan Getzlaf was. Dude, he is just... He's unbelievable. Elite 1C. I kind of demoted him to Elite 2C, I think, like a couple games ago when he was having a really bad game. But he worked his way back up. And you know what? You just like to see that from hardworking employees.
You just love to see it. Yeah, so getting into the actual game a little bit, though, we're going to get into our recap. But one interesting bit of news before the puck even dropped. So the Ducks tweeting out their lineup, as they so often do, before the game started, and one notable omission from the lineup, Ondrej Kase, not a part of the lineup, and listed as a healthy scratch. Now, you did note that in the game against San Jose on Thursday, he did go down, and I know exactly which player you're talking about. The third period, he went down in a heap after just kind of colliding into the boards. It wasn't the hardest hit, but he seemed to really struggle to get back up. Didn't play the rest of that game. And then listed as a scratch tonight. So what did you make of that news that he wasn't going to be playing tonight?
I mean, Kase has had fantastic on-ice metrics for pretty much all the games this season that he has played. I mean, he's looked really good to anybody who's looked at it. The results haven't really followed. He's had a lot of close calls, but he has played overall very well. Now, it's possible this could have been more of a healthy scratch by Aikens to just kind of give him the little, like, hey, we know, you can start putting it into the back of the net. We know you can start doing this a little better. But given what happened at the last game with him going down, and obviously given his injury history, I would say that this may have been much more of a precautionary situation, because I believe he was originally slated to be in the game and there was that late change. So if I had to guess, this has got to be just really precautionary given his health history.
It's possible. That's a totally plausible explanation. It's also plausible that Dallas Eakins was looking to get Devin Shore back into the lineup, didn't want to break up the fourth line that's just rolling right now, Delorier, Grant, and Rowney. And Kase did not look very good at the end of that last game. He was out there for the Sharks' shorthanded goal that would basically break the back of the Ducks. And he didn't look good on that goal, really didn't put in a whole lot of effort to get back, was also probably gassed. So I could see it kind of being maybe a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Either way, it's just odd to see Ondrej Kase get scratched when there's no reporting that he's injured. So we'll just have to see. It'll be something to closely monitor. But as a result of the scratch, we would see Devin Shore return to the lineup, and he would kind of bounce around the lines a little bit tonight. Played predominantly with Sam Steele and Troy Terry, who did not have a great night overall. You look at the 5-on-5 shot attempt numbers, and they got two for the Ducks had 2 shot attempts for when those 3 were on the ice and 14 against. So, yeah, a bit of a rough night for that
Yikes.
trio. Now, one thing that was interesting was seeing Max Jones get moved up onto a line with Ryan Getzlaf and Rickard Rakell. And although that line, again, also struggled at 5-on-5, they looked a lot better. So, CJ, we haven't had a chance to podcast together yet this season, but I know you've been staunchly supporting Max Jones for a long time, saying that maybe he doesn't have the highest upside of any of the Ducks prospects, but certainly is a guy who could become a very good player. And he did score tonight, which we'll get into here. So how are you feeling right now? How are property values trending on Max Jones Island?
Property values on Max Jones Island are climbing, and they are climbing fast, man. They are looking real good, especially since Murray sent Jones down to San Diego just for that little 1-game stint. And I had mentioned on a previous pod with Jake that, Jones just tried way too many stick handles. He had that extra move. He's got the skill. He's got good board work, great edge work, and he's got a good shot. But he just wasn't getting it off, and he was always trying to deke in to make that extra move. So there was an article from Elliot Tieford in the OC Register where when he was sent down, they talked to Dallas Eakins, and he basically said, you know what, he's making one too many moves. He's got a good shot. He just needs to learn to get it off there. So that's what we want him to do by sending him down to San Diego before we get him back up here. And it really does look like that he has taken that advice to heart. He now has 3 points in his last 4 games, including a couple of goals in that span. So he's looking really good. Him being up with Getzlaf right now, I think, is a really good vote of confidence from Dallas Eakins to get him up there and get him a lot of chances. And those two had a lot of moments tonight where they did look very good, obviously on Getzlaf's goal as well. But I've liked what I've seen from him lately, and it seems like he has developed and he's taken Eakins' coaching to heart.
Yeah, speaking of that goal, that would be the first of the night for the Ducks. Just 4 or so minutes into the game, the Ducks getting a clean breakout out of their zone, which has been a bit of an issue lately. Ricard Raquel with a nice little dump-off feed, which would find its way to Ryan Getzlaf, and then he's able to knock it down with his glove to enter the blue zone, and then a nice cross-ice pass over to Max Jones, who makes a really heady play and just gets it right back over to Getzlaf, since Alex Pietrangelo just totally overcommits on this play, and then Getzlaf bangs it home into the empty net. Although, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to blame Jordan Binnington on this one, but he left Getzlaf a lot of net to shoot at. But like you said, those two just looking great immediately. And I do find it interesting that there's definitely a statistical case to be made for these two thriving together, because Max Jones shoots the puck a lot. He's actually one of the more prolific shooters on this team. If you look at pretty much any shot-based number, whether it's high danger chances, scoring chances, expected goals, Max Jones' name is always near the top of that list for the Ducks skaters. And so putting him next to a guy in Ryan Getzlaf, who's such a good distributor, I think that could be an interesting combination. Getzlaf typically seems to do well next to guys who love to shoot it. Him and Andre Kasha have done well together in the past. So I'm very curious to see how that line will continue to evolve. And of course, you have Ricard Raquel on the right side, who's just very good. But just a couple of minutes later, Derek Grant would get the first goal of his night, his career night. This is just kind of an innocuous play. Jordan Binnington recovers the puck behind his own net, backhands it over to Alex Pietrangelo, who's in the right corner of the blue zone. Nick Delorier comes in on the forecheck, makes it so that Pietrangelo turns it over. The puck somehow squeaks over to the front of the net, and Jordan Binnington, as Brian Hayward on the Prime Ticket broadcast so astutely pointed out, took the wrong way back to his own net after coming out. You're supposed to come back on the same side as the puck. He didn't do that, looked very lackadaisical on this play. Grant is the beneficiary and just kind of smacks it home before Binnington could even get back to his net. So pretty good start there for the Ducks, I'd have to say.
Yeah, absolutely, and it just shows that Grant's kind of been he's been pretty good lately. That fourth line has been just hemmed in their zone for a good portion of this early season, and now the last couple games they've really seemed to step up a little bit. They've been playing a lot more in the opposing team's end. They've been doing a lot more things of what you want out of a fourth line. You're not necessarily expecting a hat trick from Derek Grant and, a ton of scoring from your fourth line, but you want some energy and you want them, kind of keeping the puck away from their own zone, giving you some of that energy and hard work. And every once in a while you do that enough, it's going to pay off. And Derek Grant was in the right places at the right time. He did have a nose for the net. And that first goal, I think, was a good example of that.
Yeah, I mean, Jake and I on the pod in the last few games have definitely been critical of the Ducks' fourth line, but the last couple of games, so tonight and the game against San Jose, their numbers at 5-on-5 are actually quite good. If you look at the Ducks' the Ducks' four most common lines tonight, 3 out of the 4 got absolutely shelled, and that fourth line was the only one that was above break even. And so obviously they're not playing the same type of minutes as the other lines. They're not being asked to match up necessarily against the other team's top competition, but that is a really big deal if you can get a fourth line that can give you anything, and not just offensively, but just staying afloat at 5-on-5, not getting caved in, because otherwise that's a pretty obvious weakness that the other team can exploit, especially when you're on the road and you don't have that last change.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, CJ, since I know you're a numbers guy. Should the last 2 games with the numbers we've seen, is that evidence enough to keep that fourth line going, keep them together, keep Delorier in the lineup? Or, where do you see that line kind of trending long-term here?
I think that given their performance over the last 2 games, you do what you can to keep them together. They've been really the only line that's actually been above break even in terms of shot metrics lately. So I think I'm kind of a believer in this may or may not be, the right way to go, but I'm kind of a believer in playing the hot hand when you have a line like this that's playing as well as they have, especially in comparison to some of the other lines that the Ducks have been rolling lately. I think you find ways to keep that together. Now, if Kasha is healthy and he is available to play, that obviously kind of complicates things a little bit. But as of right now, Rowney, Grant, Delorier, they're working for whatever reason. And for me, I think you should try and ride that. I think the difficulty though is finding when to kind of stop riding them. I think there's been some criticisms, and I think every coach is guilty of this, of maybe trying to ride a certain line, combo, pairing, whatever it is, for way too long based on some other results, and that not working out. So, but for the time being, the results have been there, and I think they've earned the ice time.
Yeah, here's my question. So, right now, the Dallas Eakins loves his fourth line. They have been consistently together. They actually played once again. They played the most 5-on-5 minutes of any line tonight. So he loves him some Delorier, Grant, Rowney line, and fair enough. They're playing very well. But assuming that Kasha is healthy enough to play next game, what do you do? Do you take back out Devin Shore? Does Troy Terry spend some time in the press box? What's your thought on that?
That's a really difficult question, and in my mind, Kasha has definitely earned the right to be in there, even if he's not necessarily scoring. He's driving play in a very positive way. And, as much as all of us really like Troy Terry and think that he's going to be a good NHLer coming down the line, he's still kind of searching for it. He's still trying to find the magic formula to really put it together. He shows flashes of brilliance. Tonight in particular, I was not very impressed with Troy Terry. I don't think he had a particularly great game. It didn't look like he was creating much in the way of looks, was knocked off the puck a lot easier, and he always kind of does that, but I honestly wouldn't be opposed to maybe scratching Troy Terry, or maybe even sending him down for another game or two, a la Max Jones, and just as this whole hey man, go down there for a game or two, dominate, get your confidence back up, come back up. It is a decent problem for the Ducks right now to have that many forwards to try and figure out how to put in the lineup.
Yeah, so in all situations tonight, Troy Terry had 1 shot attempt. This is the bad version of Troy Terry. This is the version that I was very critical of to start last year. Troy Terry, if he's not shooting the puck at all or very little, he becomes a far, far less dangerous player. He is a very good playmaker, and that's always going to be a strength, but that only goes so far if you're just not shooting at all, right? There's only so many guys who can be effective solely as playmakers from the wing. It's not very common that you see a pass first or pass only guy on the wing. Typically that's going to be more of a center. Like Sam Steele, for example, doesn't shoot the puck a lot, but as a center, that's not necessarily what you're asking him to do. You're asking him to create. So yeah, I'm kind of there with you. I thought that Troy Terry had a really strong start to the year, but the last few games that we've seen from him just haven't really been totally impressive. Now, I do think, though, and this is something that I want to ask you a little bit about here. So part of this season for the Ducks is finding out what they have in these young players. And I think part of that means you have to accept that there's going to be some ebbs and flows. Now, for you, are you more of the mind that you keep that, you just kind of live with it, live with it, die with it, whatever happens? Or is there room for sending them down when things just really aren't working, at the risk of maybe, hurting their egos? Like, I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think it really depends on the player. The kids right now, Max Jones, Troy Terry, Sam Steele, all these guys, they are, number one, they're not eligible for waivers, and they're just starting out their NHL careers. And they'll, in all likelihood, put it together to varying extents and be more successful than they are now. That being said, they do have the ability to send them down. They have flexibility that Bob Murray can play several different cards here. And let's be real here. The Ducks, as we've said before, realistically aren't Stanley Cup contenders this year. If they make the playoffs this year, it's really more of a bonus.
Are you sure
than
about that?
Else.
Are you sure about that?
I don't know. When you have Derek Grant on your team, man, anything is possible.
Yeah, literally the best player in the NHL.
Literally Selke, man. But when you have those options available to you, then you know what? You can use it. Now, I don't believe that sending down Troy Terry for any length of time is really going to benefit him. He's already dominated at the AHL level. He knows what he's about down there. Any move down to the AHL, really for any of the kids, like Jones, and we saw it work for Jones, for Steele, for Terry, for whoever, is more or less going to be confidence moves. It's not going to be about a development anymore. They really don't have anything left to develop down at the AHL level. So I'm of the opinion that if you have the option to do this, and if you're a team like the Ducks, who realistically isn't going to be one of these top-tier contenders, then you should utilize those options. Because at this point, it's more about the development of your players and getting them to grow, to make that upward trajectory and forward progress, as opposed to doing every possible thing you can to win hockey games.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head where Terry lit up the AHL last season. I don't know how much there is left for him to learn down there, right? Because he was so good. But on the flip side, these guys aren't going to be waiver exempt forever, and so you almost want to take advantage of it while you can still do it. And there's nothing wrong with sending a guy down who's already clearly really good in the AHL to just dominate a couple games, get some confidence back. Because Troy Terry does seem to be a guy who kind of, his confidence with the puck seems to ebb and flow a little bit, where there's games where he's not quite as much looking to make plays and to deke guys out coming down the wing. He's maybe deferring a little too much. So, yeah, I don't really think there's a right or wrong answer here, but I don't know. I think the Ducks are going to have to do something. Maybe just put him with Getzlaf or put him on the first power play unit, but you have to keep these guys engaged. And look, I mean, there's just the reality of it that it's a long season. It's an 82-game grind, and you're just going to suck some games. Like there's no getting around that either. All right, so we've got a minute left here before our first break. So let's just go over this quick goal here by the St. Louis Blues to start the second period. This is going to be one in an otherwise spectacular night for John Gibson. Don't want to take away anything from the game that he had, but this was kind of a weak goal that he let in. There's no getting around it. Vince Dunn shoots it from pretty far out from the circle. That being said, the Ducks didn't do a heck of a whole lot to stop Dunn from entering the zone. Pretty weak blue line defense there, but he comes in anyway, shoots it through. A bit of a screen with Josh Mahura coming up to challenge, and that would make it 2-1, so cutting the Ducks lead in half. But yeah, just not a great goal there for John Gibson to give up. Now, I did want to ask you, since we haven't really had the chance to talk about this, what do you make of John Gibson's game as of late? Tonight was definitely his best game in a while, but what are you seeing from Gibson lately?
So obviously you mentioned that he had his best game in a while tonight. He also, I think, overall played a pretty good game last game despite the score. Like he wasn't his typical John Gibson, goalie Jesus self. but he was definitely improved from his previous, I'd say maybe 5 or 6 games. The previous 5 or 6 games for most of that homestand, and for like a game or two on the road trip leading up to that homestand, something just seemed very off about him. I don't know if he maybe is playing with a nagging injury or something like that, or he's just not in the right headspace, but he has not looked like the John Gibson that we know as of late. So with that said, it was really, really nice to see this game. And I talked about previous upward trajectory with the prospects. And I think you can still apply the concept of upward trajectory for even veteran players in certain small sample sizes. So what you want to see from John Gibson, who you know is probably still the best goaltender on the planet, is just going through a rough patch right now. And as long as you see that upward trajectory kind of clawing his way back, that's really what you're going to be looking for. And I think we've seen that. Last game was a decent game. He suffered from a lot of defensive breakdowns, but then tonight's game, he was absolutely fantastic. So I am cautiously optimistic. I want to see him put a few more of these games together before saying John Gibson is back, but it's definitely a positive development.
Yep. So we're going to take a quick break here. On the other side, we're going to finish up our recap and get into some big picture thoughts here. Okay, back from the first break. So to kind of add a little bit to that John Gibson comment, before this game, John Gibson is barely straddling that line of being one of the few goalies in the NHL who are saving more goals than they're expected to. At least in terms of starters. He does have some of the highest workload of the league, but that's just not the John Gibson that we've come to know, who's consistently just smashing those performances, when his team is giving up great looks. And what I've noticed in his game lately is that he's giving up more goals that are just clean looks, just goals from further out where there may be a slight screen. For the hurdle goal from last game comes to mind. He's been giving up more of those, and that's just very uncharacteristic. And I feel like that's something that's easily correctable. Again, I don't really have a great handle on how deep he is in his net typically, but he seems to be a little deeper in his net on these far out shots. And I'm sure that that's something that they'll talk about with him, and it seems correctable. There doesn't seem to be like a fundamental break in his game. So yeah, like you said, good players can go through rough patches just like any other player. And I do expect him, maybe not. It's hard to ask a goalie to basically do what Henrik Lundqvist has done throughout his career and be great every year. But I do expect him to get back up more into that upper tier of starting goalies very shortly. So
I forget who it is. It might be Travis Yost or somebody on that lines who has a phrase they like to repeat quite often, which is just goalies are voodoo. And yeah. I think that's just like in general, like what Henrik Lundqvist has done throughout his career is just so rare. Like even when you look at some of the greatest goaltenders of all time, like Dominik Hasek and a few of these Martin Brodeur and stuff like that, they had long periods of consistent play, but they also had, garbage years from time to time. And so seeing what, Lundqvist has done is nothing short of spectacular. And those are exceptions to the rule. So John Gibson, could he be that guy who's consistently just great every single year in and year out? He very well could be, and he's done that for most of his career so far. But, goaltending, again, is voodoo, and if he goes through rough stretches like he's been lately, well, that's not really something anybody should really hold too much against him.
Yeah, exactly, and we can't underestimate how many shots, how high his workload has been the last couple of years, especially last year. And so at some point that has to take a toll. Now he's still having a good season overall, but this is maybe the first time in a little while where we've seen him really go through a rough patch. But that being said, tonight stops 37 of 38 shots and really was outside of Derek Grant's, now building MVP case. John Gibson is pretty much the only other reason that the Ducks won tonight, because you look at the shot attempts on the game, it's not pretty. They were outshot attempted by a 2-to-1 ratio, 49-21 in favor of the Blues. Scoring chances were 20-10 for the Blues, and high danger chances were 10-5. I mean, that's that's just not good. But when John Gibson is at the top of his game and Derek Grant just goes into Human Torch mode, well, then none of it matters, which is what happened tonight for the Ducks. Kind of moving through this recap, though, maybe the highlight of the night, I think quite easily the highlight of the night, the Ducks shorthanded. And one thing that I've noticed with the Ducks this season, I'm curious for thoughts on this, is they have appeared to be a little more aggressive shorthanded. It seems like they're looking more for opportunities to get offense, even down a man.
Yeah, and I think that this is pretty clearly a coaching mandate from Dallas Eakins, that he's probably actively instructing his forwards to try and create chances. If they see an opening, if they have open ice in front of them and they get the puck back, they're going the other way instead of just dumping the puck in and changing like we saw previously over the last few years with this team. I really feel like this is one of those situations where Eakins is looking for offense where he can get it. And he understands that he doesn't have a ton of finishers. He understands that this team isn't going to be an offensive juggernaut. But if they have opportunities to kind of catch teams on their heels and to do the unexpected, then maybe he's going to push them to do that. The Ducks right now are tied for second in the league in shorthanded goals, tied with about 3 other teams with 4 on the season. So they're definitely up there. And I believe they are also in like the top, I'll need to double check this, but I believe they're kind of in the top echelons of NHL teams in terms of shot attempts on the penalty kill as well. So there's definitely something going on here that I think is probably at Eakins' behest, where they're trying to attack on the PK if they have the opportunity.
Nice use of the word behest there. That might be a first on this podcast. I don't think that word has been uttered, at least not when I've been on.
I am a writer.
Very good. Very good. CJ just coming in and just flipping the script on everyone. Very nice.
What's up, everybody?
But yeah, I mean, not to completely overlook what you just said. Yeah, I do think that they have been more aggressive, and you saw that on this goal. Derek Grant and Carter Rowney pressuring the Blues as they're trying to exit their zone. And by the way, this entire play happens because the Ducks get a shot on net, shorthanded, and it leads to a face-off in the Blues zone. So, again, that seems to be the way to go as long as you can manage the risk. And here Derek Grant just, again, anticipates the play, gets his stick in a passing lane, intercepts it. It's also just terrible awareness by the Blues. But nevertheless, let's not take away from the goal. Derek Grant then goes in all alone on Jordan Binnington, kicks the leg up, faking the wrist shot, and then just throws on a couple stick handles and just slips it through the pads of Jordan Binnington to make it 3-1 Anaheim. That's not a fourth line move on that breakaway. That is actually a pretty sweet move. And look, I guess it's time for me to eat some crow, because I've been pretty vocal about Derek Grant and that fourth line just not being good. And I'll readily admit that tonight
not good.
I look pretty dumb in tonight's game. Like, I don't have, I'm fine saying that. It doesn't wound me to say that. But so, yeah, they played really well. And I'm not saying that Derek Grant can't be in the lineup or can't be a contributor. But if he's being asked, to log heavy defensive minutes each night playing on the fourth line, yeah, I don't know if that's going to really hold up long term. But clearly, I mean, really just beyond any doubt this season, he's been a good penalty killer. He wins a lot of faceoffs in the penalty kill, which we talk a lot about faceoffs on this podcast. But I do think on special teams, faceoffs can be pretty important. And when he's given an opportunity to chip in some offense, he can do it. And there's absolutely a role for guys like that in the NHL. I guess that maybe my issue with him is more so just how he's being used at 5-on-5. I still think that the coaching staff is giving him a little too much rope at 5-on-5, where he's, before the last couple of games, I mean, that fourth line has been pretty consistently caved in. And I'm willing to bet that will probably hold up. But I'm not trying to say that Derek Grant is some terrible player that just shouldn't play at all. So hopefully that clears it up. Hopefully people are satisfied. Maybe I'll do like Sportsnet after the Don Cherry firing and post a notes app tweet on Twitter, and that'll be good enough. Maybe an apology to Derek Grant's family. Just who knows? I'll go over the top here.
Give you a
that should be enough, right?
Give you a non-apology. Am I gonna have to sit here and apologize on your behalf?
Yeah, I'll just say something to the effect of, well, I'm sorry if anyone was offended.
Wow. Wow. Oh,
Yeah,
by the
yeah.
way, just before you go on, I did out of pure curiosity, I took a look at the numbers. The Ducks are the number one team in the NHL for shot attempts per 60 minutes on the penalty kill, with 23.23 on average. Second place is the Philadelphia Flyers, a full 3 shot attempts per 60 behind. And when you're talking about limited minutes on the penalty kill, that's a fairly sizable difference. The Ducks are
Yeah.
also highest in expected goals for per 60 on the penalty kill. So they're definitely, as a couple of my favorite Twitter followers that I like to follow, who are Megan Hall, Mike Fail, Allison Lucan, who are some of the better analytics people on Twitter, I would say they have their whole thing for what they call the power kill, for aggressive penalty killing. And I really like that term. The Ducks seem to, again, have a power kill going on, and they proved that again tonight.
Yeah, and they definitely need it, considering their power play isn't all too powerful this season. I believe that with that goal, the Ducks now have only one less goal on the penalty kill than they do on the power play. So you hate to see it, but hey, if the Ducks can make up for their power play woes with a good penalty kill that can even chip in offense, well, I still don't think it's a wash by any means, but that does help mitigate it to some degree. Moving on to the third period here, the Ducks would basically just sit on this lead, going full turtle shell mode, as we've so often seen in the past. Outshot attempted 12-6. Scoring chances, though, were slightly in their favor at high danger situations. Took a couple penalties, managed to survive them. I actually thought Rickard Rakell had a really good game defensively. In the first period, he broke up what was going to be a tap-in goal for the Blues on the penalty kill, and it wasn't quite as dramatic in the third period, but I believe he tied up Sammy Blais in the slot to prevent a clean look on John Gibson. So, hey, Rickard Rakell didn't score tonight, but I know that some people have been a little critical of him, but I think he's having a damn good season. And I know you've talked about this a bit, but once that shooting percentage starts picking up even a little more, I think he's gonna start putting up some big numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. I think that Rakell, when he was drafted, was actually billed as a very good two-way forward. And when he kind of broke out with the Ducks, he was never bad defensively, but he was always just kind of break even in terms of shot attempts. A lot of times maybe in the 49s, 48s, things like that. But the dude could finish, and the dude was a really good goal scorer. Well, now, this season especially, I would say, I feel like he's been rounding out the defensive side of his game very well. We saw it tonight on the penalty kill. He's getting a lot of penalty kill minutes lately. And as you said, he broke up those two plays and played some key roles on the defense there. So I've really liked what I've been seeing from him lately. And yeah, I mean, realistically, the only reason why he's not scoring as much as he usually does is pretty much strictly because of his shooting percentage. I'll need to bring it up here, and I can do that later, but I know he's shooting well under his career average right now. So at some point that will rebound, and the goals are going to start coming at a more frequent pace for him again.
Yeah, so his career average shooting percentage is 12.5, and this season so far, I think this is before tonight's game, he's shooting at 9.7%. So that's going to pop back up at some point. And I mean, 9.7% it's not like he's totally snake bitten, but it is definitely significantly under that average. And I mean, he is getting looks, and especially if you look at his goal against San Jose, those are just going to start going in at some point. And hey, after tonight's game, he has 14 points in 21 games on the season. So that's a pretty good output there. Now, moving on, so Ducks managed to kill off a few penalties, just survived the onslaught by the St. Louis Blues, and then from there, late in the game, of course, Derek Grant is out there with the empty net. Almost scored at initially, Rickard Rakell trying to set him up, and then afterwards they would get another chance. This time Ryan Getzlaf's able to block a shot, bring it up ice, and then he just gives it. Of course he gives it to Derek Grant, who then skates in all alone, looks both ways before crossing the street, makes sure there's no one else that he could possibly pass it to, and then just flicks it into the empty net. That would make it 4-1 Anaheim, and that would seal it. And Derek Grant flashing that toothless grin that everyone loves him for. So yeah, I mean, it's a feel-good win for the Ducks. Not necessarily the prettiest, just watching the game and looking at the stats, but I think that these are the kinds of wins that this team needs to build around right now, that especially after a difficult loss against San Jose, where really I thought that they shot themselves in the foot. Same thing when you look a bit at the Detroit game. So I think the Ducks needed one like this. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but what do you make of it, looking ahead here?
Yeah, I agree. Even though the numbers on paper outside of the score box don't really look very good for the Ducks, if you're a player on this team, you're going to take the wins that you can get, right? Every win for you is a good win. And for a team that had been just on a downward slide for the last 5 games or so, getting a win, breaking a losing streak, and not only breaking a losing streak, breaking it against the defending Stanley Cup champions, that is a big confidence booster for a lot of these guys, and that has the ability to carry over into the next game. This is a very tough road trip. The Ducks dropped some games against opponents they probably shouldn't have dropped some against this last time, and this is a very, very high difficulty road trip playing against mostly playoff contenders. So taking a game like this, almost kind of stealing the win on away ice, I think this is going to be very good for the Ducks' mental state. So we're going to have to see if they can build upon that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just looking at some of the performances, another thing that I did want to point out that I didn't touch on before we got into the recap, Jacob Larson scratched tonight. I think he's been bad lately.
Agreed.
I think yep. I'm kind of past the point of sugarcoating it with him. He's been bad, and I know that there's people saying, well, wouldn't you rather have him in than Michael Del Zotto? I don't think it particularly matters at this point. Jacob Larson is not really trending to be more than a third pairing guy. Whereas, guys like Terry and Steele, when they struggle, you still see those guys as potential top 6 players one day. I think that seems to be their destiny. And so you want to give those guys every chance because there's a value there on the other side that you want to get to. But with Larson, it's been tough going for him lately. And yeah, he's still got plenty of time to develop, but I don't know. I keep kind of circling back to the same takeaway with him.
Apologies to people on the live feed. I think something ended up happening here. This is what happens when Jake isn't here. So I'm trying to get Felix's face back up.
Yeah, I think people could still hear me though. I'm not sure if that's factual or not. But yeah, actually, you know what? This is a great opportunity. We are going to go into our second break here. And on the other side, we are going to get into some listener-submitted questions. We'll be right back. Just let me know when it's fixed, and I'll cut back in.
Yep. Sorry, guys. Boom. Done.
All right. Okay. Going back now.
Yep.
All right. So back from our second break, we're going to get into some questions here that our great Twitch followers are submitting here in the live chat. So for those of you who don't know, after each game, we do a live broadcast on Twitch. So that's at twitch.tv/acpod. And it's a great way for us to interact with our listeners. You get to see our pretty faces, although pretty might be a bit of a stretch. We post stats in the feed. We do a lot of cool stuff that I think adds to the overall experience. And you can support the show by becoming a Twitch Prime member, and you can do it in a way that's with absolutely no cost to you. So if you're an Amazon Prime member, which, if you're not already, you probably should be anyway. Cause,
come on, guys.
2-day shipping is very good. It's elite. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you actually get a free Twitch Prime membership. And so you can become a Twitch Prime member. That helps support the show. You can subscribe to it using that. And there's absolutely no cost to you. So once again, that's at twitch.tv/acpod. And I did want to shout out some of our loyal subscribers, including Varluna, who has been subscribing at tier 1. So I should add that if you're subscribing, you do have to renew that each month. Varluna now, great listener of the show, has been subscribing for 11 consecutive months. So that's pretty darn impressive. Quack City 22, of course, also coming in with the renewal. Thanks a lot, Chad. We do appreciate that. So let's get into some questions here. We've got one from S3D A Give. question. Does Grant's hat trick change his overall standing and role in the team? Does the needle move at all? What do you think, CJ, on that?
Not as of right now. Derek Grant knows what he is. He's got a role on this team. And
Hater.
Wow. Am I going to be the realistic one here? Come on.
Just kidding.
So that's
ahead.
the thing, is that you need to see consistent performances like this. Now, if Derek Grant scores 10 goals over the next 15 games or something like that, well, then at that point, yeah, you got to start looking at change here. But one game really isn't going to move the needle, especially given the fact that he, has had some rough games for a good portion of this season. So this is a great thing for him to build off of. We'll see what he can do with it and hopefully translate it into more consistent, better play. But at the end of the day, it's about consistency. And Derek Grant hasn't really shown that yet, even with this game tonight. So we'll just kind of have to see what happens. But basically, to answer your question, no, one game, even as great of a game as it was, really isn't going to move the needle all that much.
Yeah, and in the interest of not opening myself up to more future criticism, I'll just say that I agree with you and leave it at that. Moving on here to Literate Gal's question. So the Gulls called up a player from Tulsa, and I believe that this was, I'm blanking on the name, just totally blanking, but I know that our great Gulls writer, John Broadbent, brought it up in our chat. Does that indicate a replacement at a Gulls or Ducks level? So I don't know, to be quite honest with you. I am not as I don't have as much attention to detail like John does at that level. But I don't really see any reason why that would affect the Ducks as of right now. That seems to be a bit more of a goals-based move. CJ, do you have anything to add to that or something I don't know?
No, I completely agree with you. The vast majority of ECHL moves, especially for a team like the Ducks, who aren't super beat up right now, injured like they have been in previous years. Yeah, they're missing Josh Manson, Hansabis, Lindholm, and Kasha has had his issues, but realistically, they haven't been super injured compared to previous seasons. If the Ducks were super injured and sapping a lot of their Gulls' talent, then maybe some of those EACHL call-ups would have more of a direct effect. But as of right now, no, this is mostly going to be more of a Gulls situation.
Yeah, the Ducks are not at the point where they're calling up guys from the ECHL. Rest assured.
Yeah.
Rest assured. Moving on here to Chad Law's question, Quack City 22. Question for Felix, so I guess I have to answer this. As a former goalie, when you were in a slump, what was the reason for those slumps, and was it easy to put your finger on what was going wrong and how to fix it? Well, yeah, so for those who don't know, I did play goalie for the majority of my hockey playing quote-unquote career before hanging up the pads. And you could argue I was in a slump the entire time, being that I wasn't like some elite goalie. But I guess that for me, just because obviously I don't know if this is even transferable to like guys who are actually good. But when I was in a slump, a lot of it was just kind of mental, so not so much fundamental flaws in my game, but just kind of keeping, because once you get into a slump as a goalie and pucks start going by you start getting into a bit of self-doubt. You're maybe a little too jumpy on the play, and it's really a situation where you have to remind yourself, all right, one shot at a time. As my coach used to tell me, just worry about the next shot. All you can really control is that next shot. You can't worry about that last goal you let in because it's over. You can't worry about, is this going to affect my ability to start on this team? You just can't get into that. So I think a lot of it is just mental and not getting frustrated. And, sometimes there are legitimately technical things that need to be adjusted in your game. And I think that for John Gibson, he has a very good goalie coach, as he's aptly named Sudsy for the Ducks. And I'm sure that that will be corrected in short order. Because like I said earlier, it does seem like he's getting beat on a specific kind of shot. And that's great news for a goalie coach because you can just kind of square in on that particular weakness and get it corrected. CJ, any comments from your goaltending career?
Yeah, my illustrious goaltending career. Chip has played like 3 goaltending games lately. Like she's transitioned over that, and she's probably better than me at this point. Lower center of gravity too. No, I mean, just from my non-expert opinion, because we all know how much you value my non-expert opinion over Felix's years of actual experience. Goaltending in the NHL, people are so good at that level that really when it comes to positioning, it is a lot of times a game of inches. If you're off your position, by 3 or 4 inches or something like that, that could be the difference between the the puck sailing wide and the puck going up into the top corner. It is arguably one of the most challenging positions and one of the most grueling things to do in just professional sports in general. And how much attention to detail that you have to that position can be the difference between having some good games and having some bad games as well. So, and I think that what you said is right, that he is getting beat on a particular kind of shot, and hopefully the Ducks goaltending coach is going to be able to identify that pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting into our next question here, this one also coming from Chad. Sorry, by the way, folks, if you've got a question, try to make it obvious that it's a question in our chat. I'm not Jake. I don't usually handle this after each game. So help me out a little bit here. It's okay. Just bear with me. Bear with my own ineptitude. Quack City, though, Chad coming back in asking, if the Ducks play like this the rest of the road trip, what is a realistic record for the trip? So, CJ, what do you think in regards to that question? And just for clarification, the Ducks have 3 more games on this road trip against the Capitals, Panthers, and Lightning.
Well, given those opponents and their shot metrics tonight, I would not expect them to win many more games with playing this type of game. Again, Gibson and Derek Grant really stepped up and helped out the Ducks here. It's certainly possible they could probably put up, another win or two if Gibson steals games like we know he's capable of. But if they continue to play like this, on this road trip, man, I don't know. I could see them maybe scraping by another win, but I also would not be surprised for them to drop all 3 remaining games on this road trip if they keep getting outshot like this.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a matter of which trend will hold up. If John Gibson continues to play like he has, like you said, hey, they could win all 3. But if you then look at the 5-on-5 performance, things get a little more dicey. Varluna, our esteemed colleague, asks, how long are we going to have to wait, or how long are the Ducks going to have a poor power play before a coaching change? So I don't think Dallas Eakins is in any danger of losing his job. But the power play is really, really bad right now. Yep. I mean, it has been all season. Do you see any potential changes behind the bench? Maybe Mark Morrison, the assistant coach. Do you think any of that is in play as a result of the Ducks power play?
So I'm going to preface this with a couple of things. Number one, I actually don't know if we know of the assistant coach. I wordsmithed so great earlier today, and then just everything goes out the window. English is tough. I don't know if we're aware of which assistant coach is in charge of the power play this season. I know last season it was done by committee, and they didn't have a defined power play coach who was in charge of that. So we may be on another committee type basis right now. So I'm not even really sure you could pin the blame on any one person. But I will say this. My second point is, even if you have a power play coach who is known and who has been identified, at the end of the day, the assistant coach's job is to execute the vision and the plans of the head coach. And for me, I think Dallas Eakins deserves some responsibility for this. Dallas Eakins isn't going to sit here, go to one of the assistant coaches and be like, hey, the power play is all yours. I'm not going to be involved in it in any way. That's not really how this works. He has certainly an effect on this, and especially if it's a by-committee approach like it was last season, then I think definitely he can share a little bit more of the blame. So I don't know if we would really see any coaching changes. It's really tough to tell because you're getting into individual coaching roles which aren't necessarily super obvious to a lot of the public. So realistically, I don't know if I could answer that. What do you think?
This is the biggest difference with having CJ and Jake on, is that CJ is willing to consider the idea that Dallas Eakins is at fault for something, whereas Jake is more likely to blame the Honda Center hot dog guy than say anything bad about Dallas Eakins. So there you go.
We love you, Jake. We love you, but
a little bit there.
Yeah.
Hey, I got to take my shots. I got to get my shots in when I can when he's not here.
When he's not here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why it's inconceivable that Dallas Eakins would not have some type of blame in the Ducks' power play ineptitude. That just seems fraudulent, like as an idea. And so, yeah, I don't think it's going to cost him his job by any means. Maybe we're going to get to a point where we have to start to think that maybe it's just the roster. Again, though, like I said on the last podcast, I think that if you have 5 first line guys in the NHL who have a man advantage, you should be able to consummate some type of decent power play. It just is. It seems hard to be this bad. Moving on though to some other questions, we've actually got quite a few tonight, so we might try to just roll through these. A really good question from Raquel's Goatee. It's really good, mostly because of the username Raquel's Goatee. Do you think that Kasha misses more or less than 30 games the rest of the season? What do you think? 30 games? Do you think he misses up to 30 games? I'm going under on that one.
I'm going under on that one too. That's such a difficult. Yeah, Kasha's. I think at this point, it's realistic to say that Kasha is more at risk for injury than maybe some of the other players. But even given that, yeah, I'm going to put under that. I think Kasha is steadily learning to put himself into better positions. I think the injury that he got last time, if he indeed was scratched for injury purposes, was more just, again, another unfortunate situation. I know he kind of like had started falling down and was just in a very bad, awkward position when the other skater hit him. So, yeah, I'm going to take the under on that, but that's such a hard question to answer realistically.
Going under. PA Blackhawk asks, do you think this road trip will help the team focus on their play and help chemistry develop? I mean, that's usually what we assume at the NHL level, that road trips help chemistry. So I would say probably yes, but looking at how they played at 5-on-5 tonight, I don't know how much focusing there really is going on. Stevie D asks, how can the Ducks lose to the Red Wings and then beat the Blues? Hashtag confused Ducks fan. Yeah, that's a fair question. What do you make of that? The disparity in results and with the quality of the opponent.
Welcome to hockey. I mean,
yeah,
that's literally like all you can say. You know what? And that's one of the reasons why, I think Jake and I, and Felix for that matter, stress sample size. That's why sample size is such a big thing. That's why we beat that drum constantly, is that, especially with hockey is more prone to variance, wild swings game by game than I think most other sports out there. That's just the nature of the game. But that being said, the more sample that you give, the law of averages really starts to kind of play out here, and that's when you get a true example of the talent level. I'm going to be having an article coming out hopefully on Monday where I've always kind of said that, look, 20 games into the season is about when you have a big enough sample size to start drawing conclusions about the team, specifically about their play through that point in the season, not necessarily predictive of future play going forward. But it is enough of a size to where we can say, okay, you know what? This is how the Ducks kind of have been as of late. And so I think that, there's going to be times when they're going to beat the defending Stanley Cup champions, and then they're going to get hammered by, the Sharks previously, or lose to a team like Detroit. Right? This is just going to happen in hockey, and really what matters is the big picture. It's patience. It's looking at a lot of different games, a much larger sample size, because let's be real, there's 31 teams in the NHL. All 31 teams are filled with some of the best players on the planet, and these guys are tremendously skilled, tremendously talented. Even, a team like Ottawa still has players that would absolutely torch college, junior players, things like that, and they're capable in any night of, having scoring outbursts and winning a game. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and I mean, you could even argue that the Ducks probably should have won against Detroit. I mean, they totally blew it at the end, but they actually had the better of the shots, the chances, and so that game maybe they should have won, and tonight they should have lost. But like you said, this game can be extremely random. Lewis X209 asks, can Mike Babcock help the Ducks power play? And I don't know if that was meant as an official question or not, but there's a lot for those who are not aware. Anytime the Maple Leafs lose a period, the Canadian media goes crazy. But the Leafs are actually struggling right now. If you look at their record They've lost their last 4 games in a row now, 3-5-2 in their last 10. And they are tied with points. They're only 5 points ahead of the Senators and 6 points ahead
By the
of
way,
the Red Wings.
I have a glorious stat for you right now.
Yes, let's hear it.
The Ottawa Senators have more regulation wins than the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. Yes. And also, I mean, they've given up the second most goals in the Eastern Conference. They've only given up 1 less goal than the Detroit Red Wings. That is not company that you want to be keeping either. So
I thought Tyson Barrie was supposed to completely fix their defense, though.
Oh yeah. I mean, anytime the Leafs make anywhere close to a positive move, it gets accelerated
Cody
into
Ceci,
an excellent move.
Cody Ceci.
Well, that's the thing is that, a lot of people are blaming Mike. I don't know, this just turned into a Leafs podcast, but a lot of people are blaming Mike Babcock for their struggles, and I mean, he definitely has his share of the blame, but they also brought in guys like Tyson Barrie who don't make them better defensively, and Cody Ceci who just don't make them better at all. And so Kyle Dubas is skating by pretty nicely here in terms of who gets the blame. But yep. I mean, let's just say that if the Leafs fired Mike Babcock, which I would still be shocked if that happened, quite honestly. Although as a Canadiens fan, I would love to see anything just going to hell for the Leafs. Would you consider, if you're the Ducks, hiring Mike Babcock and firing Dallas Eakins?
No, not firing Dallas Eakins for Mike Babcock. No, not even close. And Babcock is also one of these coaches who has a very different style. Like he tends to have more modern systems. He coaches the team, I think, in a very modern way. However, his player kind of relations skills are much closer to Randy Carlyle than they are to Dallas Eakins. Babcock is known to a lot of players to be a difficult coach to play for, who will kind of get in your face and throw you into the fire and stuff like that. So, I don't see that happening, and I don't even see him even wanting an assistant coaching job if on the off chance, and I agree with you that I think it's unlikely, but on the off chance he does get fired, I would, think that he would go the Quenneville route and sit the year out before looking for another head coaching job, because realistically, he's got a good enough pedigree to where some other NHL team would be more than happy to have him as their head coach.
Yeah, and I mean, I also just don't think the Ducks could afford what Mike Babcock would probably be asking for. He signed the richest head coaching contract that we have on record with the Leafs, and I don't think the Ducks as a franchise are willing to pay that much for a coach. I also just don't think it would make any sense. I mean, you invest all this time and effort into making Dallas Eakins the guy, and this might be controversial, but I don't think at this point, it's hard to say if Mike Babcock truly represents this big upgrade over Dallas Eakins. The Leafs have somewhat underperformed as a team, at least in the playoffs, and this season they haven't been good. So where's the evidence that he's this like elite coach now? I'm not really seeing it. I'm also a Leafs hater, so make of that what you will. Big shout out though to Bro Lil, who subscribed to us with Twitch Prime. Really do appreciate that. Stevie D with a fun question here. Who has the scariest NHL profile picture this year? So their headshot. He's going with Silverberg, who he says looks like a crazy cousin that loves WWE. So he looks like Jake? He looks like a crazy guy who loves wrestling?
He can look like that a little bit. I mean, he is also Malfoy. Okay. He looks like Malfoy with missing teeth, which, Slytherin guys with missing teeth are pretty scary, so...
Yeah, I don't really have a good one there, but yeah, that seems like a good candidate. Making our way down the list here of questions, Random US 929 asks, can you see Derek Grant scoring more than 12 goals this year? I mean, he's already scored, let's see here. I mean, he obviously got his 3 tonight, and on the season
5?
He has five already. So he could definitely hit 12 goals this year. I think it's fully in play.
He's on pace for goals? More than that.
Yeah, he's on pace for 20. So,
boom.
Yeah, sure, why not? Smash the over. Just smash it. I'm never going to doubt the literal best player in the NHL ever again. Literate Gal asks, Lindholm didn't fly out with the team on this road trip. Do you think he ends up joining them? I was not aware that he didn't fly out with them. I mean, I don't really have access to their boarding passes, so I wouldn't really know that.
Why? You're a terrible analyst then. Come on.
Yeah, I'm just uninformed, just lazy on the beat. I don't know. When do you think we see Lindholm again? And I guess it's just like something you have to do on sports podcasts, but we have to preface here that we're not doctors. We don't have to preface that with anything else. Like when we're making statistical predictions, we don't have to say we're not statisticians. But yes, we are not doctors. So when do you think Lindholm comes back for the Ducks?
I'd be surprised if he came back on this road trip. It is a fairly short road trip, and yeah, they are playing against some good teams. But I just think, look, you're already shallow on defense as it is. Your best player is looking to come back here fairly soon. He was dealing with this same injury that he missed some time with earlier in the season before coming back and then going on IR again. I wouldn't even bother flying him out for such a short time to get in for maybe 1 or 2 games. Just sit him here and wait till the Ducks come back to Honda Center and make sure he's 100% ready, good to go. This injury's behind him and not nagging him anymore.
Yeah, I mean, so Literate Gal chiming in here in our chat that was Eric Stevens reporting that. So, I mean, if he didn't join them on the road trip, like you're kind of alluding to here, I mean, I doubt that it's because he'll join them at some point. They probably see this as an opportunity for him to get extra rest, and maybe he'll be back for the Ducks home game next week on, I believe, next Friday. Okay, so we're kind of wrapping up in terms of questions here. A fun one. Question, what is your all-time favorite goal celebration? CJ, do you have a particular one that comes to mind here?
It's probably going to be cliche, but man, I don't think anything's going to beat Timu's record-breaking goal celebration. Throw the glove up in the air and fire, fire the stick gun at it. And this has been coming around a little bit lately, but for those of you who actually aren't aware, fun little bit of trivia here. So that's obviously an extremely famous goal celebration where Timu breaks with the Winnipeg Jets, breaks the rookie goal scoring record. He throws his glove up into the air and then he takes his stick and is like he's shooting. The glove that he threw up landed on Dallas Eakins during that game.
That's
Dallas
right.
Eakins
Yes.
Dallas Eakins was Timu's teammate with the Jets as a defenseman at that time. So fun little hockey trivia for you.
Yeah, that's right. I totally forgot about that. My personal favorite. So this is just like a personal favorite. Not saying it's the best, but let's see here. So PK Subban. Here comes your Habs mention. just earmuffs if you need them. But in Game 3 of the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs in 2014, gets a breakaway against the Bruins, and just very rare that you see a defenseman get a breakaway. But he was coming out of the penalty box, and he just puts a move on Tuukka Rask going backhand, forehand, and that would put the Habs up 2-0, and he would just give it a real solid, real textbook fist pump, and just the crowd roaring. So that's my kind of personal favorite that I've experienced. But I am a bit partial to Alex Ovechkin's, was it his 60th goal? I'm forgetting which one it was all the way back. The hot stick celebration where he just throws a stick to the ice and kind of puts his hands over it like he has his hands over a fire. I mainly love that goal just because it pissed the whole hockey world off, including Don Cherry.
Yep.
Yeah, so that was pretty good. Anything that gets people riled up, I'm usually a fan of. But yeah, I think on that note, that's pretty much all we have today for questions. Did you have any kind of lingering thoughts about this game or the season? Anything you wanted to kind of get out there before we start wrapping up here?
I think just the biggest thing that I want to tell people is that, look, this is a retooling team, not a full rebuilding team, but it's a retooling team. We've talked about it again and again. When you're watching this team, obviously you want them to win. You want them to support them in that way, and that's fantastic. But what's more important than the standings is the progress. Is there an upward trajectory? Are they more fun? Are they doing the right things? Are they getting better looks? Is the chemistry there? And even if they're losing, and if they win the games, it's just a bonus. So if the Ducks go on another one of these 5-6 game losing streaks, this is a lot different from last year where the Ducks would go on these long losing streaks and, they just looked awful doing it, and then there was very, very little positive in any of these losses. Even with the Ducks' losses recently, I think there's still, and we've been talking about them a lot, there's still a lot of positives to gain from them, and I think that they're setting themselves up nicely. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day. The Ducks getting back to contenders is going to be a process. Nights like tonight are fantastic reminders of why you love the game and why you support your team, but just strap in, get in for the long haul. We're going to be okay.
Yeah, and one thing I would add to that, just big picture, I think Max Jones producing and continuing to kind of get on the score sheet is a really big positive for the Ducks, just because I think that, look, we all, you know, a lot of people, including myself and Jake and others, have talked about Troy Terry and Sam Steele really being the guys that are going to carry this crop of young Ducks forwards and carry them into the new wave. But Troy Terry, look, I think he's been better this year than he was last year. I think there's numbers showing that. But he's not really been productive at all, and there have been games where he's just been kind of invisible, and that has to be factored in. And I think you could make a similar case with Sam Steele. But Max Jones hasn't been that productive, but if you look at all the numbers, he shoots a lot. He's consistently kind of showing up on that radar. And I think there's an objective case to be made that he's been the best young forward for the Ducks this season when he's been in the lineup. And so putting him next to Ryan Getzlaf, like I talked about earlier, it just makes logical sense. And so I am very curious to see where he goes with this opportunity. It is a Dallas Eakins coach team, so that line could very well never be seen again in history. But I think that it will be curious to follow. And look, Max Jones, like I said, there's a case to be made there. Could he end up being the most productive of the three this season? We will just have to see. So on that note, we're going to get out of here. Different ways that you can support the show. You can check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/ACPod. For $1 a month, you get access to a patrons only Discord chat. This is where you get to interact with us when there's breaking news, when there's just stuff going on with the Ducks. We're going to try to spruce that up a little bit, maybe add some more features at the $1 tier. But the real fun is at the $5 tier, where you get 2 bonus episodes a month. And this is where we kind of just go all over the place, talking about different topics around the league, just bigger picture stuff with the Ducks. They're really fun. And I think that for $5 a month, if you really do enjoy the show, well, it's a great way to support us further. This is obviously a pretty big time commitment, the way that we do it. Now, another way you can support us that's totally free. Look, I understand if money's tight, that's very understandable. But another way you can support us that's totally free, just look up Anaheim Calling on the Apple Podcast app, and you can leave a rating and a review. There's a growing amount of Ducks podcasts now out there, and so we have to stay near the top. We got to, getting there is one thing, but then staying there is another. So by leaving a positive rating and review, that definitely helps the show get noticed, and it also is great to hear from you guys and know what we're doing well or what we're doing wrong. If you're not an Apple user, though, you can always check out Spotify, Stitcher. We're also on YouTube. Look us up there. And if you're listening on YouTube or I guess watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe there as well. You can check us out on social media. CJ is on there at CJ Woodling. Like he said, he's got an article coming out, so make sure to give him a follow. I am on Twitter as well at Felix_Sicard. The links will be in the description of the show. And of course, AnaheimCalling.com makes it all possible at Anaheim Calling. So that is going to do it for us today, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you at the next show. Talk to you then.
Bye, everyone.